I wanted to take a moment to talk about our sponsor, Alt21, the foreign exchange and hedging platform that saves you time and money on cross-border transactions. A previous guest, Dan Gardner, spoke about forecasting and risk. One of his central points was, as he put it, the things we're doing now are so incredibly complex, to see even a little bit into the future takes an enormous amount of struggle, and even then we're going to make mistakes. As CEO of Newroll, predicting just 12 months out is hard. As we expand, variables and risks multiply. Anything I can do to take risk off the table is helpful. In the past, I've been blind to the risk of FX exposure in our budgeting. A small movement could eat into our investment budget and compromise our credibility when our forecasts are wrong. If you want to remove risk from your foreign exchanges without breaking the bank, head to alt21.com. That's alt21.com to find out more. Hello and welcome to Enter the Boardroom with Newroll, the podcast exploring what makes great boards and board members. I'm your host, Oliver Cummings, CEO of Newroll, the board search specialist and market leader, bringing science to the art of board hiring. Today's guest, Louise Hill, stuck a stack of her children's iTunes bills on the fridge in 2011, thought there has got to be a better way, and founded GoHenry, the money app giving kids a head start in life as they learn to earn, save, spend and invest. Louise built GoHenry from the ground up, launching in the UK in 2012, and now helps over 2.2 million kids, 1 in 5 British 9 to 12-year-olds, learn how to earn, save and spend. In total, GoHenry has raised over $123 million. In this episode, we follow Louise's journey from product market fit to scaling globally and exiting, with board lessons woven through every step. Louise, a huge welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Louise, can we start with the beginning? It's such a stressful time, that early stage of building a business. Really interested to hear what the sources of support and challenge that you tapped into that pulled you through the worst weeks.
You can probably see the grey hairs from here. I know I've used this example before, but, there was a huge amount of juggling, as most business founders know, as most parents know. And I had a network around me that was made up of friends who were prepared to go and pick one of the kids up when I couldn't get there, all the way through to dog walkers and people who could help making other things happen that I needed to happen. But in terms of what got me through, I hope this doesn't sound too cheesy, but our customers played a huge part in that, because when you start, we've always talked a lot to our customers to find out what they like, what they don't like, look at what they're using in the services, what they're not. And when you start to hear the stories back from customers of the changes that they see in their children's behaviour, or sometimes even stories about them starting to save themselves for the first time in their life because they've been watching their child saving and being so impressed by that. Hearing those sort of stories, it's more than heartwarming. That's when you know you're doing something that matters. And I think that fueled my determination. I am quite a stubborn, focused person, and I think that fueled my absolute determination that this was something that mattered. This was something we could get to work and I should keep going. And then also the team. By the time we'd launched, we'd probably been going 6 months, 8 months. There were probably 8 or 9 of us in the business. Great people, fantastic people. Several of them are still with the business today, 13 years later. And again, that was a massive motivator.
Researching for this, I heard that wonderful story you shared in the past of the parent who was inspired by their child saving up for the trip to Disneyland that the parent thought was beyond them.
I almost get tearful every time I try and tell that story. Yes, incredible.
It's a wonderful story. And I think for me, listening to you, what it highlights is that you were obviously very purpose-driven. And so that was what got you through those tough weeks. When was the moment that a board member first unlocked value for you on that journey of finding your product market fit?
We didn't really have what I would call a professional board that wasn't just the exec team for probably the first year, even year and a half. So it was probably a year and a half in, and one of our lead investors not from the pre-seed, but from a subsequent round, I think he challenged, and he challenged robustly and rightly. And that was really the first time we started to get real value from the board. Very experienced investor. He'd usually been on the board of most of those companies he'd invested in. So he had a lot of experience of other startups and was able to point out things we weren't thinking about or challenge assumptions we'd made. And that was really useful. And then a little bit later on, two people who came in during I tend to call it a late stage A series, because it was in 2020, because we did a couple of rounds of crowdfunding before that, and they were very successful. Elena Berebi of Revire, so one of the funds that invested in our A series, and she's now on the Global Acorns board. She really pushed me to believe in myself and what we could do. The other person I'd call out is Dawn Zier, who's an American lady, the ex-CEO of Nutrisystem, fated for their turnaround from being a very old-fashioned retail business into being a huge success in the US. She had such wide-ranging digital marketing experience. She was super helpful with go-to-market advice for the US. Yeah, I'm realizing that 2 out of the 3 there are both female. But those, I think, are the impactful board members that we've had.
Can we talk about what Dawn did on the go-to-market advice? Can you bring that to life with perhaps some of the detail? Because many organizations wrestle with that, going to the US, a challenge and opportunity.
As much as anything. So we didn't have any Americans in the company. We had, our A series was led by Edison Partners, which is an American, New York-based growth fund. So when they invested, they had got 1 board seat plus 1 advisor. And Dawn joined as the advisor. And I think as much as anything, it was the confidence that it gave us of knowing we'd got a strong voice on the board who'd been there and done it on the shop floor. She was CEO of Nutrisystem. She had taken them, as I said, from a very staid, old-fashioned brand to be a huge digital success, a huge online success. And some of her advice about positioning, even really practical stuff, like looking at some of the calls to action that we had worked really well for us in the UK, that we were proposing to replicate in the US. Some of her advice about, don't use that one. I don't think it will land the same way. And guess what? It didn't land the same way. It gave us a huge level of confidence. I'll give you one of the calls to action that we'd gone live with. This is what triggered the conversation at the board. One of the phrases that worked really well for us, digital adverts that worked really well for us in the UK was, I've got to get this the right way around, their card, your rules. So if you think about it, it's talking to a parent, picture of a kid holding a GoHenry card, the child's card, but it's the parent's rules that sit across it. And that worked really well in the UK. It brought us our favourite phrase, paying subscribers. So it brought customers who wanted to be with us, who were happy to pay the subscription fee, who stayed with us, whose kids they and their kids used the product, used the services, interacted with it, engaged customers, engaged paying customers, what every subscription brand wants. In the US, we had thought, fantastic, that's our best performing ad, we'll use that in the US. It brought us, I didn't know this phrase at the time, but it brought us coupon chasers. We would typically offer, open a GoHenry card today for your child and we'll give you £10 free pocket money. We replicated that in the US, $10 free pocket money. With that particular call to action came to us were people who were happy to sign up, were happy to activate the card and therefore get the $10, and then pay it and then disappear.
Loss-making customers, the worst ones.
Absolutely. So working with Dawn was able to give some really practical advice around that and a sense check on messaging and introduce a couple of organisations in the States that could help us with that as well.
So as you look back on that period of the sort of first part of the journey and establishing that product market fit, what were the 3 key sliding door strategic decisions you think you got right with hindsight?
I'm going to answer one in a slightly negative way, but as in it was to stop thinking about schools as being a gateway to reach parents. Originally very much convinced ourselves that schools was a great way to, talk to a school and then through a school reach the parents. We realised fairly swiftly, possibly not swiftly enough, that it was taking a huge amount of effort to get a school on board in the first place. And when you then looked at their communication methods, and please remember I'm talking back in 2012, 2013 when we launched, and tech was not as sophisticated as it is today. A lot of schools couldn't even email their parents, and they certainly couldn't send a HTML email to their parents. So to stop thinking that was a good way to reach customers, potential customers, that would be one. To launch in the US first, as in after the UK, rather than going to Europe. There was a lot of debate about that at the time, which was the right way to go. But I genuinely think we were right to go to the US first. So we launched in the US in 2018. These are all vastly different. The third one would be something that has now turned out to be something we're known for, one of our best loved features. If you're familiar with our brand and our cards, where it says our brand GoHenry on all of the, what we call custom cards, the child can change that to put their name on. So it becomes Go Louise or Go Ollie or Go whatever child's name is. And there was a lot of advice coming from external brand agencies saying you never ever touch your brand, you never let it appear in a different format. Actually, we pushed back against that because we believed that personalization was key for the kids. And it is still something that our customers respond to incredibly positively. So I think that was a strategic decision, was a good one.
Those are 3 really rich examples. Can I dig into the first one a little more? This, because it reminds me actually a little bit of other channels that I've seen that are false friends. So for us, as we've been scaling, we thought we should go via the investors, because if you tap into a private equity fund or a venture capital fund, they have loads of portfolio companies. But actually, there's the same dynamic, I think, as I'm sort of reflecting on what you're talking about there of the challenge of onboarding a school. It's the same with an investment fund. There's a huge amount of work to onboard them. And then you still got to go and onboard the end user. And actually, it's proven far more effective to go straight to the end user. And I wonder if there's a sort of a lesson there for board members, or at least a question they should be asking themselves when thinking about channels that look attractive like that, where they have great distribution baked in. And I wonder if would there have been anything that would have made going via the schools the right decision in your mind?
I don't think so. There was definitely, in the UK, there was definitely a differential between private schools and state schools, because private schools did have the communication tools to reach the parents. I could very cynically say that's because they have to market to those parents and keep them and persuade them of the value of their services. But no, I don't think so. And I love your analogy. I think it's very much aligned.
Can we move on to talk about the sort of the next phase of the journey as you were going into scaling? Because you make fundraising look easy, but I know it rarely is. What's the story behind that first record $5.6 million raise on CrowdCube in 2016? Because it was the biggest raise ever done at that point.
Fundraising is not easy. I don't know if it's you or anybody who's probably listening to this there. Do you know what? So we were getting ready to go for what we were then thinking of as our first VC round. And I was approached by the founders of CrowdCube, Luke Lang, and the conversation we had with him and his team was, you're a perfect fit. This is what they were saying about us. You're B2C. You have a base of existing customers to tap into. I think we had about 50,000 customers at the time. We had an emotional pull to what we do and why we do it. Holly, you've talked about being purpose-led. We were a purpose-led company. And from their perspective, that made us a perfect fit. And I remember them telling us at the time, we probably needed to get 30% of the money we were looking for committed in advance, because nobody liked to be the first one to put funds into a crowd fund. And we did that with existing investors, and then we went live to the market. At the time, there was a limit on how much you were allowed to raise, and that was 5 million euros at the time. That limit has now gone. And also, you had to set a target, and if you missed that target, even by £1, you had to give all the money back. So we set what we thought was a decent but circumspect target of raising £1 million. And yes, you expressed it as dollars 5.6 million. It was just over £4 million in 2016. We hit the million on the first day. We went over 2 million whilst it was still closed to our customers and our existing investors, and then went on over the next fortnight or so to take it up to the £4 million and have to close it. So, yeah, it was amazing. It was a real ride. And I think the things that came out of it that we'd thought about a bit but had altogether expected was it acted as a fantastic marketing campaign for us, because we were being written about everywhere. So that really helped drive acquisition during and post crowdfunding as well. And something I had never really thought about, boy, it had a positive impact on our teams. All of the staff, all of the teams who worked at GoHenry, from the teenage, the sixth formers who do one evening a week and a Saturday afternoon in our contact centre, all the way up to the exec team. It was an amazing thing to be part of and to watch happen.
So for a board member listening who's sitting on a board right now thinking about, gosh, do we do a crowd fundraise or do we go down another fundraising path? What are the questions you would be asking on that board to work out what the right answer is?
I think some of the criteria and the suitability criteria that I mentioned absolutely still stand. B2C it works far better for B2C. If there is a base of existing customers, that makes a huge difference, because you go out to people who already know who you are, what you are, and like you. But I do think the crowdfunding market is much tougher now. Watched a couple of companies that either friends of mine I try and help go through crowdfunding rounds recently, and it's far tougher to get the investors in.
And so if you were to argue the devil's advocate position for a company considering it, and you were of the view that they shouldn't be doing it, aside from those suitability criteria, let's assume they've ticked all of those, and aside and acknowledging that it's a tough market, are there any other reasons that they might not want or be well advised to go down that path?
I think it's worth trying. There's quite a bit of work involved. Number one, you've got to pass the due diligence of the crowdfunding platform. There's CrowdCube, there's Seedrs, are the main ones in the UK. You have to do a lot of prep. We were told that we should prepare to man the forum so that we could respond to potential investors' questions. So we put a lot of work into, we created a Google Doc with all of the what we thought would be the FAQs, and then we updated it. We took shifts so that we were 24-hour, round-the-clock shifts, so that we were staffing that and responding. And we didn't cut the paced answers. We would We had the information to hand, but we would write a personal answer to each one. It's a lot of work. I would never suggest anybody does it without a backup plan, because if you don't raise a lot of money, you don't want to leave yourself with a shortened timeline to bring in funds. At the time we did it, we thought, okay, they're telling us this is a great route, let's give it a go, but we'll get our deck ready, we'll do all of start talking to the VCs as well. It just so happened we raised sufficient funds. We didn't need to go and raise any more from the VCs.
So you dual tracked those processes.
Yeah. And certainly my advice to anybody would be dual track a second funding source as well.
I guess it keeps the VCs honest on their pricing. Too many people approach their board career the same way they approach their executive career. But organisations need different things from board members. New Role Plus helps you bridge the two worlds, giving you expert advice to sharpen your board profile, build non-exec expertise, and access hundreds more board roles. Go to plus.newrole.com to find out more. Since then, GoHenry has gone on to raise a total of $136 million through a combination of direct investors, crowdfunding, and growth equity. What are the basics you are clearly doing so brilliantly?
You said at the start of this section, we make it sound easy, and I'm just thinking of all the heartache and all the hard work and slog that has gone into raising that money over the years. What have we been doing right? And then I'll tell you some of what did we do wrong. So what did we do right? Showing traction and growth. Talking to, and not just talking to, but listening to customers to ensure we were absolutely sure we're providing what they want, which isn't always what we think they want or we think they should want. Concentrating on unit economics. I think that stood us in good stead at various times, in particular in our growth cycle. So showing a path to profitability, showing that we can get profitable, even if we then decide to turn the advertising tap back on to ramp up acquisition. Focus. I am a huge believer in focus. And I think it's very easy to get excited and have people throwing ideas around and, oh, you could do this, you could do that, you could do the other. When you're trying to build and scale a company, you need to be focused on delivering your core product and service insanely well. So those are the things I hope we've been doing right. What have we done wrong? Well, I'll give you one on raising funds. When we were looking for our A series, so you mentioned we raised $5.6 million through our first crowdfund. We then did a second crowdfund in 2016 and raised, I know the pound figure, £6.2 million. And so 2080. And then our A series, because it was the first full investment round, was in 2020. And we were looking for $40 million. And we assumed we would find the lead for that in the UK. And I've quoted this figure many times. We pitched to 103 funds, and that took a huge amount of time and effort and reworking of pitch decks and reworking of numbers. And in all of those pitches, we managed to get 7 funds who said they were prepared to follow if we could find a lead, but not one single lead. And that was soul destroying. That was really tough. It was tough to keep going. It was tough to keep the team enthused and believing that we could do this. We actually called a halt and went away as an exec team for a 3-day break, just to step away and take a breath, recalibrate, and think about what were we going to do next. And what we decided was we would in simple terms, we would go to the US. We would stop looking in the UK and we would go to the US, which is what we did. And 3-4 months later, we had our lead investor. I've mentioned them already, Edison Partners. So thank you to them for that. And then Revire, who are a French fund who invest in tech, what they call tech for good. They followed a little bit from City Ventures, Muse Capital, and some other little bits. But we did find the money. But spending so much time talking to UK funds and I think just naively assuming we were going to get the money from the UK was a mistake. There was a 14-month period where we were in the process of acquiring PixPay. And yeah, we got a lot of value from the board during that period, without doubt. They were supportive. They helped us cut through certain things. You are so much in the weeds of trying to work through the getting stuff uploaded into the due diligence portal, holding yet another call, looking at another version of the term sheet or another version of the legals. They were very good at gently challenging and questioning and helping cut through, helping focus.
If you went back in time with the knowledge that you have now, but an area that you would have focused on where you feel like more could have come from the board?
A lot more of the board, the questions of the board. And the other thing is I would have pushed harder to move from it being an exec team to being a fully functioning, I don't know what else to call it, professional board, a proper board.
Do you mean with independence on it?
Yes, fairly early on, we had one of our major investors on the board. That was great. And he provided a lot of support and input and experience in areas that we didn't have. But, an investor is effectively a direct shareholder. It is a direct shareholder. They are not as independent as a fully non-exec director. And that can lead to differences of opinion.
Can you bring that to life with an example? I mean, I've experienced that where I've seen the partner in an investment or the investor director being up for partnership in their fund. And so suddenly they're looking for an exit or they don't want to take certain risks. Or I've seen the fund looking to raise a new fund and therefore it changes their dynamics from what's right for the company. Any examples you can share?
One of the things is to make sure that the board is operating as a team and it isn't a them and us. It isn't the CEO versus the board. It should be one team. And whilst the board is there to challenge the CEO, they're equally there to support the CEO because the end goal has to be the best outcome for the business, for the shareholders. And it's I think it's quite easy to fall into almost a them and us scenario. And so it's important that doesn't happen.
Now, in early 2023, GoHenry was acquired by Acorns following initial discussions with them from 2021, 2 years before, about potentially launching a SPAC where you were going to create a single company with over 6 million customers across the US, UK, and really interested to hear how you felt after signing the deal.
We've been through a period where we've done 3 deals across a 14-month period from start to finish. And just to narrow that down even more, we closed the deal with PixPay in June, see if I can get my dates right here, June 22. Is that right? Yes. We closed our B series in November 22, and we signed the final papers for the Acorns deal on the 3rd of April 23. Yeah, so I think exhausted, but thrilled. We had been talking to them for 4 years almost. We were introduced by Greycroft, one of the funds that was invested in them. Just had immediately struck up a relationship with them and an understanding that we had the missing jigsaw piece for each other's businesses. So Acorns was very successful, US only, but very successful, but had did not have a service for families. And we were already in the UK, in France, and France by then, probably just launching in Spain, and the US. But we had systematically had to defend ourselves to investors and others alike for all of the years we've been in business as to why we let customers fall off the end of our service when they hit 16, 17, 18. And so by coming together, the plan was we'd be able to deliver financial wellness, so deliver positive financial outcomes to kids, teenagers and adults alike. Yeah, absolutely thrilled, excited, what we thought we could do.
Having been through that process now as a founder, what do you know about exiting that a founder who hasn't yet been through it doesn't? As a board member, you would make sure they did.
I think that the first thing I want to clarify, this was an all-equity deal. So we swapped GoHenry shares for Acorn shares.
So it's the end of the beginning or the beginning of the end?
The end of the beginning, I think. So technically it's an exit in that we were acquired by Acorns. We had to do the deal a particular way because it was an equity deal in order to avoid a few very early stage employees who had and investors who had a substantial number of shares not to incur a dry tax charge, because
that's not a good day in the office.
No, it would not have been a good day in the office. Believe me, they were quite substantial. They would have been substantial charges. We did buy out a lot of the crowdfund investors. That was because in the US, the nominee structure crowdfunding sits under is not recognised. They're seen as individual shareholders. And if you have more than 2,000 shareholders on your cap table in the US, you have to report as a public company and meet the requirements of the public company. We didn't want to do that. So we bought out anybody with less than 2,000 shares, but the rest was an equity deal. So that's the first thing to say. What did I learn through the process? Do you know one thing I learned personally? I had asked politely a couple of times earlier to take a little bit of money off the table. You said right at the beginning, I was a mum, a divorced mum with a large mortgage and 2 kids. I put a lot of years of my life into this business. I had previously asked a couple of times to take money off the table, and that had not happened to any significant level. One of the things I've learned is you should not be afraid to ask for that, and it is not unreasonable for a board and or an acquirer be supportive of making that happen. If it is an exit through an acquisition and another team is now ultimately running the company, one of the things you need to think about, and I think this is one of the reasons this merger acquisition with Acorns has been so successful, is to think about the culture of the 2 different companies and the ways of working the 2 different companies and what's going to happen when they come together. We were very confident that there was huge cultural alignment with Acorns, very much founder-led. Noah Kerner, who is the CEO at Acorns, talks the same talk we talk. And that was a key part of us wanting to come together. And that has made the last 2 years, as we've integrated the companies and integrated the products. So in the US now, what used to be called GoHenry US is now called Acorns Early and is part of the Acorns suite of products. So that has really accelerated growth in the US for both companies.
Louise, time has flown, which means it's time for the lightning round, where I'm going to ask you a quick question and ask you for a quick response if you're ready.
I'll do my best.
Best book every board member should read and why?
Boards That Lead: When to Take Charge, When to Partner, and When to Stay Out of the Way. It's by Ram Charan, Dennis Carey, and Michael Yusin.
Most impactful question you've heard in the boardroom?
Does this put the customer first?
I heard you asking a very good question in a previous podcast when researching this, which is, where does it say that in the regulation? Which I thought was going to be your response.
So, that's one of my favourite statements, yes. It's amazing how many times in the last 15 years I've been told, oh, you can't do that because... And I have learnt to say, show me the clause in the regulation for it says that, because 99 times out of 100 it doesn't say that at all.
You stunned silence. Boardroom behaviour that irritates you most?
Talking over other people, ignoring people.
Most valuable board ritual?
I think pre-prep, so pre-meeting, briefing the board members on the context, making sure they're up to speed so that you're not wasting time in the meeting having to do that.
Favourite quote?
Never schedule a board meeting on Wednesday because then you kill 2 weekends. And that's from Kurt Vonnegut, who's an American author.
Most significant professional insight?
Change is a constant, and you need to understand that, accept it, see it as a positive, because that is what creates and fuels a growth mindset.
Worst professional advice you've ever received?
A board member once said to me, just effing spend the money. And for the record, we chose not to.
What have you changed your mind on about boards over time?
I think I've probably mentioned this a couple of times during the conversation, but it's that understanding that shift from being the person that takes a paper to the board and is waiting for their feedback to then being on a board that was pretty much an exec team to then a status where the board is a really powerful professional board, a source of support and challenge for the CEO.
When was the last time you got a significant judgment call wrong in the boardroom, and what did you learn?
As a CEO, rather than in a role as a non-exec, really badly misjudging the likely response from one of the key influencers, kind of key voices on the board. In other words, I didn't do my pre-prep. It damaged the tone of the meeting, it impacted the outcome of the decision we were debating. It's prep, pre-present again before the board meeting, know what you're walking into.
How are you better today as a board member than when you started?
It's being very mindful that my role is to challenge and support. It's advising, asking, challenging, not doing.
And finally, 3 things our listeners should take away from this episode if they take nothing else.
I'm going to go back to that statement you made that we'd made fundraising look easy. It isn't. It wasn't. So don't believe everything how it looks from the outside. So that would be one thing. Thinking about scale from day one. If that's what you want to do with your business, you want to scale it, plan that in from day one. And then just, I hope this doesn't sound corny, growth mindset. Seeing change as an opportunity, seeing change as a positive, and knowing that it's a constant.
Louise, thank you so much for taking the time to share your wisdom and experience.
Thank you.
If you're ready to take the guesswork out of your board career, New Role Plus gives you expert support, tailored guidance, and a much wider pool of live board roles. Listeners get a 10% discount. Head to plus.newrole.com and apply the code ENTER at checkout.